The middle child is turning 5,000. We are about to witness the 5,000th men's ODI. And this format, which has existed for 5.5 decades, which has suffered its existential crisis in the last few decades, is now at a place where we celebrate a milestone. So, this is where we forget everything that you may question about the future of the game and instead attempt to celebrate the glorious past of ODIs, kind of traverse through the last 5.5 decades and these 5,000 games. And for that, we have the brilliant minds, one of some of the few remaining ODI tragics in the Cricinfo universe, in Osman Samiuddin, George Binoy, and myself. We were going to have younger representation, but unfortunately, Matt Rollo has been plucked away by Stephen Fleming, who chose to have his press conference on the day.
I was gonna say you're just introducing us like that to be nice about our age, right? You're just hiding the fact that me and George both are like just old fogies, and you are probably a young gun. You're probably not much older than Matt, but I think you've gotten us. Like that's a really nice way of saying that here are the old guys who actually remember the ODI.
I was going to bracket all of us together.
And Matt probably said ODIs not doing it. Huh?
Yeah, what is it? ODI is like the dad joke format.
Yeah.
Now it's like the guy, the one that people kind of sometimes are like, haha, yeah, but actually you're just a dad joke.
and in true middle child spirit, it's like, oh, it's the birthday, let's celebrate this middle
Let's not
child,
forget.
which is what we are doing now. But it is an incredible journey, and there are no age references here. I do by default now become the youngest on this, and this is a time where Gen Z has been inspiring us. So I will wave that flag when we reach that part of our conversation and talk through the 2010s and 2020s. But when we are discussing ODIs, and what we're going to do is we're going to try and traverse through this journey of 50 plus years and try and narrow down to what we think are the greatest games that have been played in men's ODIs. It is excessive trawling. This has been a lot of research that Osman and George have had to do. I have had to go through a lot of scorecards and try and remember. But of course, this is not so much about the scorecards. It's more about the games that have stood the test of time, which stay firm and lodged in our memories. And we are going to attempt to pick a greatest game from each decade of the ODIs, of men's ODIs that we've seen so far. And Usman, as we were discussing just before we were recording this, it's only fitting for any ODI look back to start with the 1990s, which in all fairness is really where the format became the beast that it was to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was saying to you just before we started that, you know, all those like tri-series and quadrangulars. Sorry, I can't even get my English right. Quadrangular events. They all, in hindsight, they kind of feel like maybe T20 franchise leagues feel to me now that there were so many of them and they're happening like every day. But in amongst all that, you occasionally come across a classic game and you remember them. So I was, going through like memory-wise, I was thinking of, I don't think I even remember the name of some of these tournaments that were up in the 90s, but I just remember. Yeah, go on. What do you think, George?
Yeah, there was a Singer Cup. There was a
Singer Cup, the Pepsi
Asia something. There was,
there were so many.
But I remember we used to sit and look forward to the annual tri-series in Australia. I remember that used to be like a end of the year fixture that everyone used to like look forward to.
Absolutely.
The quality of competition was so high.
That still felt like the highest quality competition in ODIs outside of like the World Cup or whatever, I think at that time.
Yeah, and just to highlight the frequency, I think it's a great parallel you've drawn there, Osman, about it being like franchise leagues. Because one of the games that may come up when we start our shortlisting of the best of the 1990s will be the India-Australia final from 98, the Coca-Cola Cup, Sharjah, a few days after Desert Storm, and Tendulkar winning India the final on his 25th birthday. But funnily enough, the same two teams had played another tri-series final the Sunday before that one in Sharjah started. Yeah, so India, Australia, and Zimbabwe played a tri-series in India, which I only remember because the final of that tri-series was at the Kotla, which was the first time I went to a stadium. Yeah. And India lost that final. And 2 days later, they were taking a flight together with Australia to now take on a tri-series which involved New Zealand. That was the kind of frequency of these
like 30
events.
years from now, somebody will be saying that, these guys played in the Blast. And then like 2 days later, they were playing in the 100. and then some of them moved over to the MLC. It's literally, it was, and there were so many
Yeah.
of them. But I still like the abundance of ODI cricket in that. And that was like the first decade that, like the white ball and colored kits like went fully operational. Like that became the
Mm.
norm, especially after the 92 World Cup. Even though I think there were some like mid 90s tournaments in Sharjah which were still in white kit with red ball. I think, and the Sahara series, of course. I think one of the
Yeah, in
Sahara Cup.
1996. Yeah.
India continued playing home series in
Yes.
white till the
In
early
white.
2000s.
Yeah, which was the bizarrest thing. Yeah. But I think it's right that we start there because that was like, the decade that that format became kind of entrenched and it became the new thing. It was no longer the coming thing, it was the thing.
Like, I know what you guys have done. I've not applied any forensic research to this using StatsGuru or anything. Like, no, I just
How
sat
dare
down
you not?
yesterday for a
How
bit
dare you
and
not?
thought, okay, if an ODI comes to my memory, then it's worthy of being on the list. And if it doesn't, then it probably isn't. So I gave myself some time to think, and I came up with a few contenders. So yeah, we can.
So why don't
Man,
you start?
you're
I know.
putting some serious trust into your memory there. I don't
Yeah,
think I can put similar
but
kind
from the
of trust in
90s and
mine.
2000s,
Yeah.
I can trust my memory. It's the more
I,
Okay.
recent years that where it's all a
yeah.
blur.
And I think those two decades, if we were to do the 90s and the 2000s, are the
Yeah.
one where collectively, I think everyone has the best memory. There, I said it. Even I have the best memory of the 90s and the 2000s
Fair.
growing up.
Fair.
So, George, I know that it was when you were in school, it was a New Year's morning ritual that you would watch a tri-series game in Australia early in the day. And I think one of them definitely features on your list.
Yeah, I'm going to start with those two, maybe slightly unconventional picks. One is, yeah, I don't know how many ODIs they played on New Year's Day. And it was the sort of thing that you did as a child, like there was cricket on the TV, you put it on, and Australia were playing West Indies. And it was a fairly low scoring ODI, which West Indies looked like they were going to win up until
Hmm.
Michael Bevan began to do his thing. And yeah, for those of us who were not old enough to watch me and Dad hit that last ball six against India, hitting a boundary of the last ball of a
Yeah.
match to win a game was incredibly rare, and it's seared into my mind. Michael Bevan hitting that ball down the
Straight down the
ground,
ground, right? Of
straight down the
Harper?
ground. Yeah.
Of Roger Harper. Was
Or
it?
Roger Harper claimed a cotton ball which he had grasped off Bevan. That I remember. I can't
Yeah.
remember who the winning boundary was of, but that
I'm going to
was
find out.
an ODI that really stuck in the memory up until this day. But there's another one, and this was from the time where we had the time and the mind space to just watch random ODIs. So West Indies were playing Sri Lanka in a tri-series in Sharjah, and you may remember it for Lara scoring 169, and West Indies scored about 330 odd, and then Sri
Mhm.
Lanka were chasing. And of all the people to take Sri Lanka towards victory was Hashan Tilakaratne, who you'd never ever imagine as
Yeah.
as being a protagonist in a great ODI. And it so transpired that they also needed 4 runs to win off the last ball, and Tilakaratne pulled. He was batting on 100. He pulled all the way down to the deep square leg boundary. He was going for six until Stuart Williams jumped up and took the catch on the boundary's edge. So West Indies won by 4 runs. That was 333 playing 329, which at the
Hmm.
time was the highest aggregate in an ODI ever. And it was just like, why would we watch a random West Indies and Sri Lanka ODI
Yeah.
in a tri-series in Sharjah? And it still sticks in the memory. And it was just a time that we lived in at the time, that we
You know,
could
I,
enjoy sport in this manner.
I remember that Bevan finish, and I just checked. It was Roger Harper, and
Harper.
apparently after he hit that shot, apparently he had a high five with Harper for some reason. Because I'm not sure why, but it says here in the report that he shared a high five with Harper. But I remember that game actually because, and I guess these are the reasons we remember. It would have been one of the first full live ODIs I saw telecast in Saudi Arabia. So I was in Jeddah at the time. I had come back actually from I was studying here and I'd gone back to Jeddah, and my parents had just gotten like satellite TV in Saudi, in their place. And I had grown up in Saudi watching like one channel in English, state channel, and the other one which was Arabic. And so like these channels they showed only football. But suddenly we got satellite TV when the great satellite boom happened in the world. And like I could access a live cricket match in Saudi Arabia, like on my
Absolutely.
TV screen. And that happened to be like what a first game to start watching was that. And then, watching, remembering Bevan hit that last ball. It was just what an age it was also for like Michael Bevan to be the ultimate finisher. Like, I don't think he would have had too many innings, whereas like what was his career strike rate? I don't think Bevan's would even
70. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Imagine he's like a lethal finisher. Looking back to it now, it just feels like I don't know, man. We were in the 1800s and not the 1900s. His ODI strike rate is 74, which
Yeah,
is
but it averages above
insane.
50. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes, I guess in those days the average was even more important.
Which was also a function of, I think now that I have the profile open, 67 not outs out of 196. That's the finisher. That's how
Amazing,
often he did stay unbeaten. When we were
amazing.
bringing the tri-series conversation, I will say that I have a very clear winner in my head for what will be the number one game for me. But in terms of other games, and I like George's filter, it's one that I try to apply to the decades that I have seen. That if
Mm,
there's something that just came to my mind, then I think it's special enough because it stood the test of time. So one of those
yeah.
easy to forget, but possibly unforgettable because of the sequence of events which I'm now going to narrate. This is the Pakistan Sri Lanka Tri Series game in Sharjah. It
Oh,
doesn't have a lot riding on it. It's not like it's some knockout
yeah.
game or a
I already
final.
know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, and it so happened that okay, this is a late evening. This is probably ending around dinner time on a school night, and it feels like the game is done. Sri Lanka coasting, they're chasing barely 190 and they are about 170 for two.
Mm.
5 minutes later, I walk into the room, they're 170 odd for five, then eight. And eventually it's a tied game. Abdul Razak has blown them apart.
yeah,
He's taken five, Wasim Akram has
Yeah,
taken three, and it
yeah.
finishes in a tie out of nowhere. Like this is one of those proper blasts from the past. If you saw it, you can't really forget what happened.
Absolute classic. Absolute. And it was like, it was, that was, what year was that? Was that the late
99.
90s?
That's 99.
99. So
Yeah.
that actually was a perfect way to end that decade for Pakistan because my memories, it's weird, right? Like George said, I think things we remember are odd ones. I remember two games in South Africa from a tri-series which involved Pakistan, South Africa, West Indies. And in two games, in one, Wakar took a fifer, and in the next, Wasim took a fifer. And they were both like, I think in one game, South Africa were like 160 for two, chasing 195, and they lost by like 8 runs. And in the other, something very similar, I think it was South Africa again, that they were like 150 for one, and they managed to lose chasing 205 or something. And these were, because you kind of you feel it at a much more visceral level when, for example, you're not covering it and you don't have your analyst hat on. You just like kind of watch it and go crazy with your friends and cousins and stuff. They were completely inconsequential games. Like Pakistan got to the final of that tournament, got whooped by West Indies, and there were match fixing allegations came out of it. But I remember those two games purely because, like the madness of like coming and checking the score every 3 minutes and seeing what was happening.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane.
All right. So we have some good shouts, but can I go to the one which I don't see having
Yeah.
any
but
contest?
we got to. But before we get to that one, unless you're about to bring up the two Desert Storm games, as in that, those are. I know where
You
you're
go on.
going
We have to pay homage to Desert
Of
Storm
course.
for
Of
sure.
yeah,
course.
Desert
Yes.
Storm is for a whole generation of people growing up watching Sachin Tendulkar. That week was a great week in sport. Him taking on the Aussies, and some of those Tony Gregg iconic
Oh,
commentary lines. The
yeah.
little man's hit the big man over
Mm.
the side screen. You'll never forget those lines. And then I can't remember who the umpire was. Had a shocker of an LBW decision against Sachin, and him just walking off without reacting in any sort of way. In the match that India, he took made India qualify, and then India actually lost that match, but then made the final, and then he's hit another 100 on his birthday and all of that. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, those
But
two,
that first game, so the first game is because that was the crazier endings was the first game, right? When he made
yes,
them qualify.
yes,
And
because they had
even though they lost the game, like that formed, I think it's such a crucial game in that decade because I think it formed a lot of like what people thought of India at the time that they were a good team, but Tendulkar was the guy
yeah,
who drove that team.
Yeah.
And often, like people would take solace from the fact that Tendulkar has done brilliantly, even if India has lost. And in that one, like it was further complicated because even though India lost, they actually qualified. So he
Mm.
helped them get the bigger victory, even though they lost like the smaller battle or whatever. And
Yeah,
it like for me, that was like it's a really like illustrative innings and match of that era of Indian cricket, where Tendulkar so much was often left to him, and he would always like kind of he would always come through, and yet this time, even though they didn't win, he still somehow came through, and it was a crazy innings because we're still
yeah,
talking a very very top quality Australia attack, right? I think McGrath was there. Was it Kasparovich who was in the attack as well, and
Yeah,
Fleming,
and
yeah,
Fleming.
yeah. And
and Warren,
Fleming,
was Warren playing?
yeah, that's the
Yep.
start. That is among the starting games of
Yes.
what it would become. I mean, of course, there was the Test series earlier in that
Yeah.
year. I think they had just played the Test series a few months before that, where the Chennai
Yes.
knock and everything had
Where
happened.
Tendulkar had taken on Warren and stuff, right? That was
Yes,
where it started and it kind of began. Yeah, actually, you're
yeah,
right. It was kind of the start of the earliest start of
yeah,
the Australia-India rivalry, I guess, in one way.
yeah. And that final is also imp- even further ingrained, I guess, from an Indian perspective, because when we talk tri series, it's not actually a very pleasant memory for Indians who were watching cricket at the time, because the usual state of affairs was that India would get enough wins or enough net run rate points, but then lose finals. If India were in a final, they were losing a final. If India were playing in Sharjah in a final, they were losing a final. In fact,
Sharjah on
between
a Friday against
Yeah.
Pakistan.
they were definitely
Sanjay
losing.
Manjrekar's famous. Always a Friday, always Pakistan, always Sharjah.
And Sharjah was just like this venue of like where crazy things would happen, right? Like,
Yeah,
I remember like in my mind, there are these two matches against Sri Lanka that India played where in one game, Jayasurya scored 189
89, 89.
Yeah,
Yeah,
odd,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
and in another game, Murli took seven. They
yeah.
were two different games, but for me, in my mind, I
It's
remember
all
them as
It's
one
all
game.
one.
Where
the the
Jayasurya first hammered
the
189 and then Murli took seven.
yeah, the 189 was incidentally one of those several finals that India lost, where
Yeah.
Sri
Yes.
Lanka made close to 300, and in response to Sanat Jayasurya's 189, India scored 54. That's what tournament finals, of course, that was the absolute pits of it, but that's what
Yeah.
tournament finals were like for India. Between Tendulkar 98 Australia and NatWest 2002, which I'm sure will come up at some point, India lost every final they played. And they played about 9 or 10 in that period of 3.5 years.
Amazing. There,
So,
there was
yeah,
one other there was one other outlier of a Sharjah triangular final before we get to the 90s pick, but there was that one other game. I'm pretty sure it was a final where Pakistan were playing West Indies, and I don't think India was involved in that tournament. But that was the one where, if you remember, Lara hit 153 in the final, and he outdid Basit Ali, who had hit an amazing century in that final as well. I'm trying to remember the score. I'm not. Did Basit Ali get like 167 or something in that final? It might have been a crazy. I might be making that up also. Wait, because that's the nature of one days. I might be totally making that up, but
yeah, I can see a couple of Sharjah
oh no, he got a
finals.
67 ball 100. Basit, yes,
Oh,
Oh
he got a
yeah.
all right.
67 ball 100, 127 of 79. So Pakistan got to 284 for four. It was the final, the Pepsi Champions Trophy. There's another name. Champions Trophy, but Pepsi's Champions
But
Trophy.
not that other Champions Trophy.
Not the other, not the Coca-Cola Champions Trophy, presumably, but
And not the
so
ICC Champions Trophy either.
not
These
the
are different
ICC Champions Trophy
competitions.
either. So they get to 284 for
Yeah.
four, and then Lara comes out and hits 153 of 143, and they go home with mm, over 5 overs to spare.
Yeah. Yeah.
Over five. This is despite Richie Richardson. Oh my God, look at this epic scorecard. Richardson hit 15 not out to win the game. Can you guys take a guess of how many balls he hit that 15?
42 ball.
27.
Oof, George, you're close. Of 50 balls. 15 or 50 in a chase of 285. This is a thing that can only happen in a 90s ODI, I feel. Like a 90s
Yeah.
ODI in Sharjah, that too.
Yeah. Those are all, I mean, it tell you something. We started with the 90s and taken what I thought would be a lot longer than I
Of
really
course,
expected at
because
the
it's the
start. But that
90s.
is it. That is how iconic it still remains. So let me just go to Edgbaston 99 World Cup semi final. It finishes in
Yeah.
a tie. And to me, why it is a clear winner, and in my head it was even before we started discussing all the contenders, is A, for the theatre of the occasion. I mean, just the fact that a World Cup semi-final finishes in a tie is theatre enough. The fact that the eventual outcome and who progresses was tied to another pretty riveting game played between the same two sides just few days earlier, which had the catch that wasn't, made it even better. And to me, there is also the what it meant. Like when we used to do those what if pieces during the pandemic, I feel like this is one of the strands. At that point, I
Yeah.
wasn't working here. I used to read and I used to feel like the one game that to me is the biggest what if of how cricket might have panned is that game. Because Australia at the time, that is a World Cup which they played in a fair amount of tumult. That wasn't some very happy dressing room. The captain and one of the senior players who was the player of the match in the semi and the final weren't known to be best buds. And they'd had a pretty poor start to that World Cup. They'd lost to Pakistan,
Yeah.
they'd lost to New
Yeah.
Zealand, only just made it.
They only
And
scraped through. Yeah.
and a defeat in the semi-final, for all you know, could have meant the end of Steve Waugh as captain. I'm not saying Australia wouldn't have achieved the success that they went on to achieve, but their cycle wouldn't have been as linear as it ended up being. As for South Africa, the curse that continued to remain for decades, who knows if that single is taken, how different their history is too. So when I combine all of these, I feel like for me,
There
it's
were, there
the
were like
clearest win.
two like great sides who were actually also that decade was also like, the other alternative history of that decade is the rivalry between those two sides. They had
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
great test series battles, some great ODI matches. And this was like the fitting end to that decade at least and the century. Like a game like this, if you just go through like the South African side, I still like I could go through that scorecard now and still think how the hell did they not win that
Yeah.
game? Klusner,
And
Donald, oh my God, what a
yeah,
lineup that was.
and they were in control of that game for the
Yeah,
longest time, and then
yeah.
Vaughan just literally prized it out of their grip. And yeah, and again,
And they were the most
It,
forward thinking, right? They were the kind of innovators of that time. Like Australia were very much like, we rely on our quality. We have good enough players like Warren, like Steve Waugh, like McGrath to win it. But South Africa always felt like to make up for like not average players, to make up for slightly less quality players, they would have to innovate more and more. Like guys like Cronje and Bob Woolmer's coach, they were doing new things. Klusner was doing new things at that time in the role that he became a different kind of finisher to even Bevan, Klusner at that time. So they were always like kind of one step ahead of that. And yeah, you're right. Actually, it's one of the great what ifs of cricket that if they had gone through because I think that South Africa side would have beaten Pakistan hands down. Like I know Australia did anyway in the final, but I think that South Africa side, the superiority they had over Pakistan throughout that decade, they would have handed them a absolute pasting as well. And then who knows where they go from there? Who knows how that turns
yeah,
out? But it was just one of the craziest games I have seen in my life. I still struggle to kind of explain it. I only saw it
all
on TV, but I
all
struggle
the
to.
twists and turns during the match, and then in that
yeah,
final over as well, because there
Yeah.
was a run out chance before the actual run out, and
yeah.
Yes.
yeah,
The third
and
ball, yeah.
you thought they would like they'd escape there and they wouldn't make the same mistake again, and then yeah, Tony Gregg's commentary again for those two boundaries that Klusner
Yeah.
thrashes through the offside. Yeah, it's
Tony Greig actually, despite not having played any cricket since whenever he retired, but I think he was an integral part of ODI cricket in the 90s.
yeah,
Like
Yeah,
when I think of ODI cricket in the 90s, Tony Greig is always like you completely got it
yeah.
right, George, when you remembered his stuff. He's been there throughout the most epic moments of like cricket commentary, of ODI commentary through the 90s. My
Yeah,
man
I
in the
mean,
decade. My ODI man in the decade.
and that's a fair shout. In a parallel
Yeah,
universe, they are still dancing in the aisles, and he is still
100%.
screaming it out.
100%.
But we have a clear winner then for this decade.
yes.
Yeah,
Universal vote.
I think so. Yeah, I think
All
so.
right, George, which decade do you want us to go to next?
Maybe we should do the 2000s.
All right, stay continue from where we have already discussed where ODI cricket was. It was obviously peaking. Osman, what are the first
So
blurs that come
again,
back when
I'll
you
go
think
back to
2000s?
actually a great point that you made just when we were having a chat earlier, is that the 2000s never produced a great World Cup, right?
Thank you,
We talked
Australia.
Yeah,
about
because Australia
Eh,
were just too damn
Yeah,
good. Huh?
because Australia, after winning in '99, they became
the,
too good and they started winning.
yeah,
So it actually didn't produce great World Cups. But I think I don't know if it's going to be the winner, but like one of the matches, because I think 2000s around that time, like I think my memory starts to get flooded with too many again, like 90s, but also because you're older and you're like, there's too much going in and you have to like sift stuff out of your head. The two games that immediately come to mind, one is the Joburg, the
The
mammoth
the 434 game.
434 game,
Yeah.
which I mean, I remember watching that. Funnily enough, I was visiting India. I was in Delhi at the time, and I was in my hotel, 2006, March, I think it was. Yeah, March
Yeah.
2000. I was in
Yeah.
my hotel room, and I had just met up with a former writer of ours, Rahul Bhattacharya, who still writes for us occasionally, has written on cricket. And we had just gone to each other. We'd gone back. We'd met up in the day, gone back, and then I was in my hotel room with nothing to do, and I just turned on the match, thinking, "Oh well, I may as well let's see what's happening here. I'm not working. I'm off or whatever." And then this game started happening, and me and Rahul were like texting each other throughout that game, and it just became like I still like the way it panned out. It's a blur now, but I think I remember. I remember thinking that there's not as many boundaries as I would have imagined for some reason in a chase of like 434, whatever. I was like, have they hit as many boundaries? Am I just like, am I missing something here? But
I,
like, absolutely, hands
you,
down, it was.
if I may, actually, in that chase, it became so commonplace that you just thought it's not happening.
Yeah.
I
Because I
think so.
think
I think it
because
became
if
like singles, right?
because I remember no because I remember reading in one of the many tributes that have come over that game that I think South Africa's innings had a passage of 30 overs where every over had at least a boundary.
At least
So
one
maybe
boundary.
that's why it wasn't registering because
I
it was
think
happening
because
all
it
the
was
time.
too
It felt
much.
like a dot ball.
Yeah, it started
It
feeling
was
like either a dot ball or a single or whatever. And it was just insane. And at that time, of course, it felt like a complete outlier because, hey, you can't do it. And in some ways, it kind of still is,
It
I guess.
remains, yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I think if I had finished up, I was like 2 years into my first stint at Cricinfo, and I finished up work. Australia, I think, had crossed 400. Went back home, so there was a gap of about an hour where I wasn't watching, and then put the TV on again. I was like, wow, okay. And then yeah, South Africa pulled that off. And if you still go back and read Andrew Miller's report of that match, where he started doing it almost over by over of the chase, like publishing over by over. It is a masterpiece. Yeah. His report of
Really
that
is.
second
Yeah.
innings is a masterpiece. It's still worth reading all these years later.
I'm trying to remember
Yeah,
who
and
I'm trying to remember who might have done comms first. Imagine doing comms for that game.
Yeah.
My
oh,
God.
So there was that, and then yeah, there was another Australia New Zealand game for me where Hayden scored 181, and then New Zealand went nowhere in the chase.
Was that
Like
just
they,
before
is
the
that
World Cup?
McCullum? Yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah.
before the 2007 World Cup.
This is the
yeah,
series where Australia played games with the rest of the world, made them think that the World Cup will be competitive
Yes.
because they
yeah.
lost
Yes.
3-0 to New Zealand,
To New
which included
Zealand.
a
Yes.
couple of high chases from New Zealand. And then we saw what they did at the World Cup. But
Yeah,
sorry,
so
George.
yeah, Australia made about 350 odd with Hayden smashing
Yeah.
181.
Yeah.
And then New Zealand had lost 4 wickets, and then McMillan and McCullum
Yeah.
went absolutely berserk and chased that down. Of
Is
course,
this where is this the game where McCullum was there at the end? He got the boundary in the last over. Is
I
this the
can't
same?
remember how that finished, but
Okay.
yeah, it was
We're talking about Nathan here, right? Not Brendan.
Brendan.
no, Brendan
Oh, it is
McCullum.
Brendan.
Brendan. Okay.
Brendan
I
McCullum.
remember Nathan McCullum finishing a game somewhere as well with the bat.
He would have too.
I guess
And
this is a
then,
random ODI memory from somewhere. I don't know.
and
I'm
then
gonna
of course, like there was, you can't move beyond the 2000s before without mentioning the NatWest final. Yeah, needs to be done.
Of course.
I am going
Just
to
because as Yash said, in his when we were discussing the previous decade, that India had just lost a lot of finals
yeah,
up until then.
yeah,
A lot of finals.
that's
And we're
true.
losing this one as well. And I remember watching it at with an uncle and cousin, and then after that, after India were about 5 down, they went to sleep, and then a couple of us stayed up, and yeah, it was pretty epic. That finish.
Would it have been late?
I,
It would have been fairly late in
Yeah,
India.
yeah.
it was around
Right?
midnight when it
Around
finished.
midnight.
Around
Yeah.
The
midnight
two
when it
things I
finished.
remember, that's the one that Dada was obviously taking his shirt off
Of
and
course.
dancing,
Yeah.
right? But the
Yes.
other one, I think, was that also the game where Nasir Hussain
Yes, he
signaled
did
up
Did
to
this.
the
the
Yeah,
and signaled up to
yes
the press box and started
with
yeah.
flipping them
his
off,
with
basically.
his ODI 100. I think his
No,
first ODI 100, and he flipped that.
Absolute epic game. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
yeah.
the other game also,
yeah.
again, just jogged my memory, was,
I
and in fact, that was the first ODI game I actually covered. Now, like, this is, I think, why
take it.
I love ODIs. It's the first game I actually covered. I almost didn't get a seat into the press box, but Samuel Hassan Bernie, name check there, ICC media manager, PCB media manager, has been my arch nemesis and best friend, frenemy throughout my life. He very kindly said, "No, you come." I went to him. I said, "I have an accreditation from Wisden. I have a letter from Wisden magazine. I think it was Wisden Asia Cricket, RIP." And he said, "Okay, because you're Wisden, I'll get you a seat somewhere." So this is the Pakistan India Karachi ODI 2003
The
4 series.
first.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
First
yeah.
after
it's the
that
first.
breakthrough tour,
Yeah.
the first ODI, the first game of that series. And it was my first, like, so it was the first ODI I went as a journalist to cover.
Wow.
Again, I was with Rahul because Rahul was on that tour, Rahul
It's
Bhattacharya. And imagine having to cover that game. Like I still remember I remember like how the ground the ground like underneath your feet or whatever, it was rumbling because of the noise that people were making in the stadium. So we were sitting in the press box outflow at National Stadium. Basically, like they had taken a stand from the fans and given it to journalists because they didn't have like space to get all the, they had like CNN's head of news was there, Nick Bryant, BBC were there, ABC was there because it was Pakistan India biggest game or whatever.
and
Um,
it was the first full tour in 15 years that India went to
Yes, of
Pakistan.
India
So
of Pakistan, yeah, and
yeah,
it had come after like the '99 stuff,
yes,
Kargil and
yeah.
nuclear stuff and all that. It come after that. So I literally remember the earth kind of trembling all the way through that match purely because of the noise and there were the bottles on the chairs that fans were doing, and in the stands you had Musharraf, who was head of the leading Pakistan at the time, and then you had Priyanka Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi had come over from here, and there were other Indian
It
politicians, and then like the spectacle on the field, like I mean, imagine 349, I think India
Yeah.
yeah.
made. The
Is he-
craziest start, it was my first sighting of one of my favorite batters of that decade, Virender Sehwag. And I was like, it was love at first sight. This guy was like, you're treating Shoaib Akhtar this way, you're treating Rana Naveed is not Shoaib Akhtar, but he was a very good ODI bowler. Mohammad Sami was also a very good one. And then, of
Yeah.
course, the poignancy of that ending, where you had Javed on the balcony telling Moin Khan how to hit a six off the last ball. It's like, come on, it's very easy. You just hit it over mid wicket.
and
And Ashish
and guess
Nehra's
what? He got a full toss.
yeah,
He did get a
getting
full
a full
toss.
toss, which I think in this day and age, a batter would put that away for six, nine
Yeah.
times out of 10, I think. And Moin, of course, was coming towards the endish of his career and couldn't do it. But it was almost, and I certainly know, I remember in Pakistan, nobody cared about the result at the end of the day because the experience of being there in a full stadium with that atmosphere, with that vibe, and that match at the end of it, there's so many things from that game. Inzi's 100, Mohammad Yusuf's innings, and Sehwag and Dravid. I think Dravid got a
99, 99.
99
Yeah.
bowled off a
Bowled
slower
by
ball at the
Shoaib
end.
Slowy. Yeah.
It's like I think we may come to a different choice, but I think I will struggle to beat that as a memory of an ODI game from that decade.
Yeah, and just to add one mini moment from it, that Mohammad Kaif catch where he almost
Yes,
destroyed
yes,
Hemang Badani's head,
absolutely,
which was,
100%.
I think,
yeah.
Razak's wicket. And the game
Razak
was,
or Malik? It was either Razak
oh,
or
it
Malik.
was
Shoaib
probably
Malik.
Shoaib Malik. It was probably Shoaib
Yeah,
Malik.
I
And
think
and
so.
it was,
Great
I
catch.
think, something like 10 of 8 at the time,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
or 12 of 8. And yeah,
yeah.
just an insanely good game. Got anything to add
Incredible.
on that particular game?
That whole series was like,
That's
Yeah.
true.
just
Yeah.
unforgettable. So high intensity, so many flashpoints. Was that the series where Inzi had the
Yes.
obstruction of the
Yes.
field, or
In
was
No,
that the
Pesh
that's
later
Tower, I think.
no,
series?
no, that was
Oh,
That was the later
2006.
series. That was
The
oh, sorry,
obstruction
that's
was
2006.
2006.
Suresh
Yes,
Raina
sorry.
Yeah,
2006.
Yes,
This is
yes.
the
yeah.
one where in the decider, Sachin plucks that catch
Oh, yeah,
off
yeah,
off
yeah,
Inzamam,
yeah,
where
yeah.
that's the only part of of the ground which did not have the boundary cone, which was,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
remember, a big subject of conversation that agar cone hota to kya ye catch hota, and
Catch hota
all
hai,
of
aise
that.
hota, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
It was a great
yeah,
series. It was an
it
epic
was
series all the way through.
it was incredible. So yeah, that is a very high contender, and I'm sure it will finish very high up, if not right at the top. a few shouts from my side, and I know we've pointed this out. As far as the two men's ODI World Cups of the decade were concerned, you didn't have great games or absorbing thrillers that you would remember instantly, but for poignancy of results and what it did to either the profile of the game or the nations involved. I think Bangladesh beating India and
Mm.
Ireland beating Pakistan at the
Yeah.
2007 World Cup
100%.
were they are iconic moments. They're
And
not
the
great games.
ramifications that had for cricket
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
future.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like it kind of, it embedded, like we're fine in acknowledging, I think it embedded the fact that, India, Pakistan needed to play each other at these World Cups, but the games themselves, like what they did and there was obviously a very tragic coda to the Ireland-Pakistan game with, Bob
Yeah.
Woolmer
Yeah,
passing, but like for Ireland cricket, what that game did, and for Bangladesh even, like the belief it gave that generation, I think that was one of Tamim's first games, I
yeah,
think
Yeah,
he
it
yeah.
played.
All
was.
three
Yeah,
of them were very young. Tamim,
all of
Mashrafe,
Shakib.
Tamim. Was Shakib playing
Tamim,
that game?
Tamim, Shakib, Mushfiqur, all were teenagers, and I think
Yeah.
all of them hit half centuries in that chase.
And Mashrafe was also playing, right? Mashrafe
Yeah,
Murtaza was also
yeah,
playing that.
yeah.
So, it kind of gave that generation a real boost. And I think, like, yeah, I think, the games, they were tight games, actually. Like, the Ireland game was I think Bangladesh wasn't as tight, but the Ireland-Pakistan
Yeah,
game, like, I think they won by 3 wickets. And, until Azhar Mahmood got hit by Trent Johnson, I think, for a couple of sixes or something, in the end, it was a fairly tight game. But not like classic games, but the results I think are so significant and so important. I think it's worth kind of noting them
yeah,
in, also
yeah,
because the World Cups were so crap. Otherwise,
yeah. And
Yeah.
the only
There was the India-Pakistan in 2003 for its stature, and it wasn't a
yeah,
very close
the,
finish in the end, but it had this high intensity throughout.
yeah,
Like, yeah,
absolutely.
they
And then Hooker
Saeed
staying
Anwar.
up, saying that he stayed up for like couldn't
yeah,
sleep properly for two weeks
Yeah,
running
yeah.
into that game
yeah,
and stuff, and that attack that he had on Shoaib. It was definitely like a moment from the decade that people always kind of
yeah.
go back.
Yeah, and my final shout, and I know this is not a probable winner, but I found it very wrong to not include an India Sri Lanka game in a decade where they played about 5,000 times. I think half of the 5,000 men's ODIs played were India Sri Lanka ODIs played in the 2000s. One of them, though, still remains very fresh in memory. It was in 2009. It was the opening game of one of those 1,000 series where 414 played
Oh, yeah.
411
In
at
Yeah,
Rajkot?
Rajkot. At
Yeah, yeah.
Rajkot, Sehwag smashed it. Dhoni batted at three. India made 414,
yeah,
and they were losing. Sri
Yeah.
Lanka, thanks to Dilshan and Sangakkara, who made 90 of 43, were actually 312 for one in
Yeah, yeah.
36
yeah,
overs. They had the
yeah,
game sealed. They were probably looking on course for chasing 414 with about 3 or 4 overs to spare. But
yeah.
from there
Somehow.
was a bit of a slide. Yeah, there were lots of runouts, lots of chaos, and
I
India
think
ended up
that
winning by
series
3 runs.
was there was a whole series of really big scores in that series, right? I think that was one series where there were quite a
It's
few,
probably
or around that time, I feel like because Dhoni kind of changed the architecture of ODI innings around then
mm,
as well. He came in and he would start blasting away towards the end, and he was another upgrade finisher, I guess, in that sense. But I remember thinking around that time, especially on Indian pitches, that like it was possible to get crazy big scores. And so like
yeah,
that 438 Joburg game was like, oh man, is this the future? And then of course, England in the 2010s after that 2015 World Cup started kind of making it very kind of ordinary and regular for 400 to be scaled. But I remember thinking this game that you're talking about was definitely one of the times when I was like, oh my God, is 400 now the new normal? Or like 350 at least? Is that
yeah,
the new normal in ODIs?
yeah. Before I ask you to pick what you would pick as the one defining game, I will also mention that while we have almost repented the lack of great games at the World Cups. One ICC event did have a great final, the Champions Trophy of 2004, which was a very
Oh,
different low burner.
very
West
good shout.
Indies somehow pulling off that
Yeah.
win against England with Bradshaw and Courtney Brown,
Yeah. In the
which was
darkness.
yes, that is something that for the Champions Trophy, which at times is a tournament which does not leave you with lasting memories. But
Yeah.
there are a couple of finals played at the Oval. One
That's a
was
really good
this,
shout. Yeah.
one was in 2017. So yeah,
And
uh,
also there was a game from that 2004 championship, which is one of the few, I think, India-Pakistan games at a global event that has been a close, tight game. I think that the India-Pakistan game in that tournament was, I think,
yeah,
I want to
I
say
mean,
Pakistan won by
I,
like
I,
3 wickets or something. Afrizi
yeah,
maybe hit
yeah,
some
but
25 of 12 balls, I remember. But it's one of the few global games, global event games between the two sides, which are actually like a good game to watch and not just
yeah,
a one-sided thumping.
yeah, it was slightly seesawing. India got off to a very poor start, but then I think
Yeah.
Dravid and Kef bailed them out. The
Yes.
score
And
was still
Shoaib
not
took
enough.
wickets, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like I might be wrong here, but part of my memory is that Pakistan were actually coasting for a lot of the chase,
Yes.
then lost
As
three or four
usual.
wickets
Yeah.
in a
As always.
cluster, which made it
Yeah.
exciting. But
This is
yeah,
a Pakistan
okay.
trademark. Yeah.
All right. So, of all these that we've considered, and if there's something else on your mind, please bring it up. But for you, what would be the defining game of the 2000s, George?
Oh, for me, the 434 chase at
Yeah.
Johannesburg, because it was the first time a team had made 400 in an ODI and then it got
Yeah.
chased out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
it
it became the
was,
second time the team had made 400 very quickly. Yeah, I
yeah,
think for me, even that Joburg, of course, and then I think just for the memories and being there, that Karachi game, I would
Karachi.
put them like, yeah, I would put them very
Yeah.
high with each other, perhaps, maybe a tie if we're allowed those.
Yeah. I mean, it does feel like it needed something as bizarre and outlandish as a
Yeah.
400 meets 400 to come at par with Karachi, just for not just the drama of the game, but everything else about it, which you
Yeah, the
painted,
occasion. Yeah.
Osman, the occasion, India returning to Pakistan after so many years. So, yeah, I think I'm gladly going to allow us to take the cop out and say South Africa, Australia, definitely 438, but also
Yeah.
India, Pakistan, Karachi 2004. Right. I think let's go back in time. We've
yeah.
done some 90s
Yeah.
and 2000s. So the 70s didn't actually have a lot of ODIs played, right, Osman? Like outside of the World
Yeah,
Cups.
we will. I was looking it up, and I think there was like 84 ODIs in that entire decade, which of course makes sense that there wouldn't be that
Yeah.
many, but like as many as I think 30, if not more, were from the World Cup. So
The
The
like
World
World
a
Cup.
Cup.
third, more than a third of all your games were basically World Cup games. And so
Yeah.
I was going through scorecards, and I think basically we have to really pick World Cup games from that decade, and
Yeah.
I would say we also have to pick like the West Indies because they were easily
Yes.
head and shoulders above any other side in that
Yeah.
decade. So I think that the two games that came up immediately to me, one is a Pakistani memory because and I'm not that old, so these are all Pakistani uncles who talk about this game. Is the 75 World Cup, I think, where they lost by a wicket to the West Indies.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't the semi, I think it was a group game.
Yeah.
Uh, it
It
was a
was.
group game.
Yeah.
Pakistan made like 260 something, and
Yeah.
this was a 60 over game, of course. In those days, there were 60 over games, and West Indies were 207 for 9 with Derek Murray, the keeper, and Andy Roberts at the crease. And somehow they scraped however many the 50, 60 they required for the last
Yeah.
wicket. And Pakistan's attack was, not a bad one. They had Sarfraz Nawaz, they had Asif Masood, they had Javed Nidal, who was a good leggy at that time. Somehow West Indies managed to sneak through by a wicket,
Yeah.
and win that game. Like I wasn't even born at the time it happened, but it's one of the games that I grew up with people telling me about. Not just like Pakistani uncles, but also like people from across the world be like, "Oh, do you remember that Pakistan West Indies game from the World Cup?" So that would be in the top something, I would think.
Yeah. I'll just, before we go to other games, so this particular game is one that I now that since we have reached a place where we are doing soft reveals of whether we were born or not, I can confirm I was not born. I was some way
There's
away
a
from.
surprise. The
Uh,
wrong decade for you, my friend. By a
not
couple of decades,
not.
I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah, by a couple of decades, I would think.
Yeah, but there is a great. So the first time I was introduced to this game was through a quiz that I was following.
Ah,
And the question was that if you look through the scorecard where this sensational heist has been pulled off, you will find that the player of the match was awarded to Sarfaraz Nawaz,
yeah,
who took 4 for
yeah.
44, which was an
4 for
excellent
44.
spell. But someone, Derek Murray, has just pulled a rabbit out of his hat. So why isn't he player of the match? The story behind that is that the adjudicator, which used to be, if I remember correct, one of the commentators or someone
Yes.
from the broadcast was the
Yeah.
adjudicator. And at 8 down, with 70, 80 runs still
They had
needed,
called it.
they thought the game was done. I think they
Yeah.
were done with their stints.
Yeah.
They had gone to the bar and they had named Sarfaraz Nawaz as, okay, Pakistan have won
And
this
no one
game.
thought
He's
to chase
taken a
them up
four.
to change it.
It never
Yeah.
changed. And
Yeah.
from what I hear, Sarfaraz Nawaz, it's a very confused presentation ceremony
It's like,
where
why
he's
am I
walking
here?
up. Yeah. So that's what actually first piqued my interest about this game. And then when you read through it, haven't seen much footage of it,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but you read through it, and of course, it feels like, oh wow, this would have been a proper classic.
Yeah, like obviously the 70s also before my time. And so therefore, when you look back at that decade, you were largely exposed to the World Cups. That first World Cup final was also a pretty good game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From what you read about it, and what some old grainy, footage, West Indies posting around 290 odd and Australia getting pretty close in that chase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
they were
was it
doing
17 runs in the end? 15,
yeah,
16 runs?
about
I think.
less than
Yeah.
20 runs the margin. So that was a pretty like for an initial tournament, that was a pretty gripping final. I think like fairly great players on
It,
both sides in
in
there.
fact,
Yeah.
it's probably still the most gripping men's ODI World Cup final bar one.
Bar one,
Like,
yes.
yeah,
Yes, which
yeah,
we'll
Yeah.
come to.
which we
I
will
think
come
what was
to.
the 79 final was not as close, right?
Was
It was
West
just
Indies England, where I believe again this is the Viv Richards 100, and what
Yes.
and
from
the run
all
outs.
the readings was an even better Collis King innings where they were four
Yes.
down and he
Yes.
hit
Yeah.
86.
Yeah.
So King and King is how I remember reading about that game the first time I tried to read about World Cup finals. But I think in that tall chase, Boycott and really was solid but quite slow, and England were
Very
never
slow.
Yes.
really
Yeah.
in
And
Yeah,
the
then
we were never
contest.
really in the chase. Yeah,
and
I think
now
it
that
was
you
like I don't think it was as bad as Sunny's 34 off however many balls chasing 300, but they were like along those lines. They
yeah.
were of that era and
Yeah.
spirit very
I don't know
much.
if you remember in the early 90s or mid 90s,
I can
they
safely say I don't remember.
yeah, so they organized, now these Legends Leagues are all, sprouting up all over the place. But you had a Masters tournament back in the day where you had teams from West Indies, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka
Oh,
all
wow.
playing. And that's where you then saw all these names that you had read about. Yeah. And when you mentioned Collis King, I remember watching Collis King in that Masters tournament. I thought this guy could
Oh
still be
no
playing for
way!
West Indies. Huh?
What did that
Wow.
happen in India? This Masters
It
tournament?
might have because there was Collis King, and that's the first time you're putting faces to
Hmm.
names that you've read about because no
Actions to
internet at the
names.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Nice.
from Sri Lanka, Siddharth Vetimuni,
Oh yeah,
you're seeing for the
Wow.
first time in the flesh. Mudassar Nazar from Pakistan. I remember him bowling his dibbly dobblies,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
Collis King coming and smashing it.
Love it, love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the
Yeah.
70s, I don't think there's that many others that stand out. We
Yeah.
probably would have to go with like a
This,
75 World Cup final.
this is
Uh,
one of those decades for which I had to do some stats guru trolling just to see, okay, what are the close results? And
yeah,
there are a couple of, as usual, from the start of time, Pakistan have been involved in the closest, most
always.
gripping games. We've already brought up the one wicket defeat in a World Cup game. I saw a game, I read of a game in Sialkot in 76 when New Zealand beat Pakistan by 1 run.
By
In,
one run, yeah, yeah.
in,
I think that might have been the first one-run margin of defeat in ODIs, by the way. I remember it only for that. I think it might have been the first time, which
uh,
I can imagine must have been gripping, but how many people
Yeah,
saw it?
so no way of saying. So
I don't know.
realistically, I feel this one comes down to whether you put the 1975 World Cup final for it being the first,
Yeah.
or what seems from the fable as an extraordinary game with West Indies pulling off their heist against Pakistan earlier in the same World Cup. Where
And
would we go?
I think more than anything in that decade, you have to I think you have to go for those big occasion games because otherwise ODIs didn't matter so much still
Yeah.
Yeah,
at that time to a lot of teams. They were like tacked on at the end of a series, or if rain happened, then it became a game in that series. So I think it's fair to like go with a World Cup game, and I would say probably the final, just because it kind of started off that West Indian era
yeah,
of control and dominance as well.
got
Yeah, I agree. 1975.
the final.
The final.
West
Yeah.
Indies winning the first
And
men's
just to make
ODI World
clear,
Cup.
none of us were born at the time of this final. Not,
We
not
have
even
said it
myself.
again.
Not even
Yes.
myself.
So let's now enter the decade where some of us may or may not have been born. 1980s. And regardless of whether we were born or not, that is the decade where if I'm allowed to say it, the peak of India-Pakistan ODI cricket
Yeah.
was born. Because there are two games that will feature for sure.
Yeah.
And Osman, I want to let you. Of course, there are World Cups to consider, but
Yes.
let's start
So
with
I had, if you remember,
yeah,
and people will will kill me, will cancel me for this.
Ooh,
But
you want to say
I had
this out?
sent, I will be honest about it. I had sent Yash like a short list of three games I think from the 80s that I picked were like iconic for me or for cricket generally. I also hasten to add for cricket generally, and I of course missed out. And Yash had to remind me, and maybe that's because of the pain of the defeat or whatever, I don't know. But I had missed that last ball six game. I had gone with India versus West Indies, the 83 World Cup final, because it was a game that, kind of woke India up to the possibilities
Yeah.
and potentials of the format. I had gone with the second ever game to be played at Sharjah between Pakistan and India. So they had played one game before in 84. This game they played in March 85, the Rothmans Cup. And this
Mm.
was that famous game where, we remembered it for Imran taking 614 against India. India were all out for 127. We, of course, it took me, I think I might have discovered only 3 years after first coming across this performance. 3 years after that, Pakistan actually lost that game. They did not chase down 124. They were bowled out
Yeah.
for 87.
Yeah.
Nobody in Pakistan, of course, remembers that. And then the third game I had shortlisted was the 87 World Cup final, purely because it
Yeah.
was, the first World Cup outside of
Yeah.
England. It opened up the possibilities
And
of the subcontinent as a host to ODI cricket. So
and to be fair,
I
and
had
to be
given these
fair,
three games to
yeah.
Yash, and I'd like to just quote exactly from Yash's reply to me because I think it's worth noting. Yash said, so I gave him these games and he was like, yeah, that's top. It's a great list. And then he says very quickly, Miadad might call though. And I was like, oh my God, how did I miss the definitive India Pakistan in Sharjah game from that decade? Like, of
Yeah.
all the games to miss, I think it's because it's like, it's like breathing oxygen. You don't forget that you have to breathe when you're outside. It's become kind of like that for a certain generation of Pakistani fan that, oh yeah, of course, Mirdad, last ball six, like, just breathe it in or whatever. So I forgot. But yes, it is there, absolutely.
What I do want you to do, as maybe this is your way of apologizing for having forgotten for a split second,
Yeah.
break that game down in say 30 seconds to this generation for whom these they may have come across it, but it is not as etched or as much part of
Are
folklore.
you talking about the Australasia final? The
Yes,
86 final,
The
right?
Miyada game. Yes.
Epic game. India made what was at the time a pretty big total, 245 or something. Pakistan were always out of the chase. India were a very good side at the time, ODI side. They had just won the mini world championship, I think in
Yeah.
Australia, having
Yeah.
beaten Pakistan, I'm pretty sure. So
Yeah.
they were an ODI side that was a serious one. They had won the World Cup in 83. Pakistan were not in the chase, had not established any kind of superiority against India in Sharjah until that point. Mirdad batting very slowly all the way through. Azhar Ruddin missed a very simple run out, penultimate ball to run out Tausif Ahmed, which would have sealed the victory for Pakistan. Mirdad stands guard for the last ball. Chetan Sharma comes in to bowl. Mirdad looks around, counts the number of fielders. Thigh high, waist high, thigh high, full toss onto his legs. Mirdad whacks it over mid wicket, deep mid wicket, six, runs off the field like total cartoons. Tausif gets thumped on the head by a cop as the crowd
Yeah.
converges on the field. Mirdad makes a life. Pakistan establish a decade long, if not more, superiority over India in these contests. I don't know. Anything
Yeah.
else to kind of establish? I think that kind of
So
covers it.
though,
I missed out a
so
few
again,
things.
like you hear about that game, right? And then the legend of Mianda, then all of that, and then yeah, spill over into the 90s when my cricket memories, are from. You see him playing that role in the 92 World Cup and jumping up and down versus Kiran
With
Moraine,
Kiran
and
Moore.
this character that he is and whatnot, and like this real street fighter of a batter, and that yeah, like some games acquire some mythical proportions, and that game was one that where Pakistan began to dominate India,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
in Sharjah uh, on a Friday.
Yeah, and I think
All
Yeah,
right.
it started their kind of superiority over not just India, but actually turned, it
Yeah.
culminated with the 92 World Cup win. But I think
Yeah.
that was established at that moment that he hit that six. And, it was commemorated in a great song afterwards, in a spoof parody ghazal, which somebody sang. And the lines were something along the lines of, Miadad got lakhs and lakhs of dirhams, and poor Tausif only got one dirham after, even though Tausif was like, kind of the major role because he got that single which allowed Mehrdad back on strike. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten there. But
Yeah.
and absolutely, yeah, legendary, epic game, ingrained in the mind of all Pakistani cricket fans, apart from mine, clearly. But I did well. Thank you very much, Yash, for reminding me of the errors of my ways.
There
Yo,
was
yo,
also the
so,
World Cup match that no one watched.
yeah, I was going to say, when you say mythical proportion,
Yeah.
that has to come in. India Zimbabwe, and I've debated this at times where, yeah, I know India winning the World Cup final against that West Indies is a big deal, and I know it'll probably be a higher entry in this final vote. But India Zimbabwe in a must win to be 9 for 4 and 17 for 5, and just that added layer of what was not a BBC strike. That myth also has been
Yeah.
cleared well enough. It wasn't a
Which was
strike. It
not,
was,
yes.
yeah, it
Which
was
was
a
not.
They just
decision.
had too many events to
Yeah,
cover.
there were
Yeah.
four games. There were
Yeah.
four games and some other sporting events
Yeah.
happening. Two
Yeah.
games were not picked to be on
Yes.
broadcast. One of them was
Yeah.
this one at Tunbridge Wells. 17 for 5, couple of scores, 175. India win. It is unreal. And to think that till 5 years ago, when they made a biopic for which they
Well,
filmed.
I was going to say we will always have Ranveer Singh's rendition of it, at least.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
will always have that to
They even
remind us.
recreated the I don't know what the flowers were, but the purple
yeah, they did.
flowers in the background. Yeah.
Yeah,
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 they
yeah,
did.
they did.
Yeah, I
They
mean,
did.
full props to
Yeah.
Kabir Khan, the recreation of that. I mean, no one knows, but from everything, even some of
Absolutely.
those photos that do exist from that game, you can almost fit them
Yeah,
together. They sit right alongside each other. Uh,
yeah.
George, which way do you think we're going with this decade?
Yeah.
Which is the
See, the couple day 175, the 1983 World Cup final,
Yeah.
Miandad's last ball six, and the 1987 final for Mike Gatting's
yeah,
reverse sweep that went wrong. It was a 7-run victory for Australia, so
yeah,
another tight World Cup final. Yeah.
actually,
Closest.
yeah. I
Yeah.
stand
Actually,
corrected.
closest in terms of runs, other
Yeah.
than, of course.
Bar one.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'd go for, I don't know, just for the game that, changed Indian cricket, the 1983 World Cup final, and how
And
improbable that defense was against West Indies at
Yeah.
that time.
The other reason actually the 83 final becomes really important, and it was an epic game, actually. It was an epic game, low scoring, which is, we love a low scoring ODI
yeah,
thriller, and it was low scoring. But the other reason it becomes so significant is because that's where the BCCP head and the BCCI head, BCCP at that time, what the PCB was,
yeah,
General Noor Khan, or Air Force Marshal, sorry, Noor Khan, and NKP Salve, I think, they met, and they were like, I think at lunch on the day of the final, they're like, "Hey, why can't we have this in India and
In
Pakistan
India.
next time?" So that
yeah.
was like, seeds of like them hosting and taking the World Cup outside of England and taking it to that kind of market uh, began there. They happened there. So I think, for that reason also, it's a very, very important and significant game.
Yeah.
Significant game. I think, Pakistani fans will also recall the Nehru Cup final of '89, which Wasim Akram, Pakistan beat West Indies in the
Ooh.
final. Off the last ball of the final, Wasim Akram hit a six. After maybe penultimate ball, after Imran had told him to play it steady, and he'd just come to the crease, Imran was like, "Look, just chill, take a single and give me the strike." And Wasim was like, "Okay." And Viv Richards was bowling, and he swept him over mid wicket for six. And I think like his first reaction, Wasim's, was that, "Oh no, I'm gonna really get it from Imran here." Like he'd won this tournament, but his first reaction was like, "Oh, I'm gonna get it from
Yeah.
Imran here because I disobeyed his orders or whatever." So that will be another epic that I think a lot of Pakistani fans will at least remember. But yeah, I think 83, 87 final, I think those are, and of course, Miadad six. Like, I mean, yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
we're
Yes.
40 years on from it now. So,
Yeah. So
um,
yeah. So we know the three or four, but
yeah.
what is the one on top?
E-
For me, the drama would have made it the Australasia Cup final, but for drama, event, unlikelihood of result, and what it meant to the future, I think with all those
Yeah.
parameters, the 83 final
83,
83
I think,
final.
yeah, becomes
goes
like the
up there.
most consequential game of
Yeah.
that decade, I would say.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Okay. Let's
Fair.
jump all the way to the 2010s. We will save the 2020s for the last because as we will realize when we come there, there hasn't
if you
been
remember
much.
any.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been harder to recall ODIs from the 2020s than
Yeah,
the 90s and the 2000s. And,
yeah,
But even in the 2010s, I was just thinking, and I can only think of World Cups, and there were some great
uh,
World Cup games
that's
in
true.
that decade. There was from 2015, I will pick the semi-final, obviously,
yeah,
between South Africa and Australia.
Yeah.
Iconic game.
South Africa and New Zealand.
All South Africa and New Zealand.
Yeah.
Also in the 2015 World Cup, also at Auckland, New Zealand
New
versus
Zealand.
Australia.
yes,
Absolutely
100%.
smashing game.
Yeah.
yeah.
And 2019 final, obviously. And then in 2011 also, there were
Yeah.
some really strong games.
Like I think we
ODI,
have to I think we have to start probably in this case by saying that yes, the 2019 World Cup final wins because not only is it the
yes,
greatest game of that decade, it's
for
probably the
me,
greatest
It is.
game ODI game ever played.
Yeah.
yes,
Right.
yeah,
And like still, I mean, I was just because of researching this, I was going through the piece that I had written on that game, and I swear, if I one, I don't think I can watch that whole game again, ball by ball, because it's just too painful. Knowing what's
Yeah.
going to happen
Yeah.
is too painful. Two, I loved it because it was low scoring. And that whole period from 2015 to 2019 had been all about England's crazy batting and taking ODI cricket to like new heights, which I myself felt actually was a slight betrayal of ODI format because ODIs are not T20s. I don't mind if
Yeah.
T20s go all the way into, although I do actually mind, but maybe not so much. But yeah, I can let Gen Z worry about that. But
Yeah.
ODIs always felt were like really nice mix between tests and T20s in that they require skills from both,
Yeah.
and so I appreciated that final was a complete turnaround from what had happened in the tournament and what had happened in England on those pitches between 2015 and 2019 and Owen Morgan's side and stuff.
yeah,
And then, added on top of that was, of course, like the total quirks, like Trent Bolt stepping on that boundary becomes a six. Ben Stokes off his bat goes for four more. Mitchell Santner not taking a bye off that last ball.
Actually ducking under it and then not
Ducking
running.
under it and not running. Like, why? A couple of really close LBW umpire calls going
Mm.
against New Zealand. It was, yeah, it was just too much. Just
yeah,
just
and
too much.
the irony, like you think back to that semi-final and Martin Guptill nailing this incredible throw from the deep to run out Dhoni, and then
Yeah.
his throw again in the final going
Yeah.
off Stokes' bat. And then
Yeah.
there was all this debate about whether, Dharmasena had got the call right.
Yeah.
Should it have been 5 runs?
Yeah.
Should it have
Yeah.
been six? Oh
Yeah.
my
I
God.
remember I remember being in the press box for that, and I was sitting next to Sambit who was there, and Miller was there also, and it was Miller who I think some just had this eureka moment after the game. And he was like, "Oh, that was wrong. He shouldn't have called that for whatever reason." I was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And Sambit, of course, and I think I feel it is my duty to our listeners and viewers to reveal this fact that Sambit spent at least half of that final watching the Wimbledon final going on his computer
So
at the same time and pretending to be paid some interest to the World
And
Cup final that was
and I
happening.
will also then further the story that that meant that by the time, and both things ended at almost exactly the same time, which
Yeah.
means by the time the last act was performed at Lord's, Samit Bal was also quite shattered because Roger
Yes.
Federer had
Yes, because Federer had
just
yeah,
missed
he
out
lost to
against Djokovic.
Djokovic, right? That he
Yes,
lost that
yes.
final to Djokovic.
In a
Yes.
tiebreak, even that
In a
one went the
tiebreak. Yeah,
distance.
yeah.
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 Yes.
I remember the end of that final because it was, I was at Star Sports at the time and watching it with another colleague and Tendulkar and Gavaskar in the same room and just
Wow.
needing to show immense restraint, in controlling my emotions. I could not react. I was just sitting there.
Only with like two of
I
the
think
greatest Indian batters
Yeah.
of all time, like
So there was
watching this final.
like I want to jump up and down and and then no, I had to sit. And then after the work was done and wrapped up and emotionally spent, one of the hardest things to do is get food at St. John's Wood at around 9 p.m. on a Sunday evening. It's
Yes.
impossible.
Because everything shuts down. It's
Everything
not just
is
St.
shut.
John's Wood. It's all
Yeah.
of London and all of the UK. It just shuts down
Yeah.
on a Sunday. Nothing is open.
yeah.
It was
I'm
terrible.
I'm going to indulge in a bit of a personal anecdote of it as well, because that final is perhaps the last time I've been able to watch something outdoors in the capacity of a fan. And
Yeah.
I was freelancing at the time, but for the knockout stages, I was free. I didn't have any work assigned to me. And I was in the UK. I had tickets to watch the semi. I watched Guptill's first throw in
Oh,
Manchester on that 2 day affair. And then for the final, could not purchase a ticket, would have had to sell body parts for it at the going rate then. But I managed to be at Trafalgar Square, which is where the ICC fan park was happening. And
yeah, yeah.
it was obviously fun, but we had a very similar scenario to what you brought up about Samvit, where there were enough of us who were at least keeping pace with the scores from the Wimbledon final.
From Wimbledon, yeah,
And
yeah.
then when it's reached the fifth set, it's like, okay, even that is going bonkers. There was this one, and there was no network at Trafalgar Square. So you can't forget video
Welcome to London.
streaming. Yeah, forget video streaming. It was barely possible to even get a score update on, say,
Yeah.
a website. There
It's
happened to
because
be this,
Sambit was using all the bandwidth and load.
there happened to be one American woman who was there with someone but not interested in the cricket. And her internet was working and she had it on her
Perfect.
phone. So there's five of
Amazing.
us who are watching on the big screen the cricket play out and then on her phone the tennis play
And
out. So
intimidating her, no doubt.
it was really, I mean, it is bonkers. And yeah, I think there is no debate for this decade.
Yeah.
And like you've said, Usman, it's perhaps wins the all time. If we were to pick one of all time, it wins.
Yeah.
So not going to spend a lot of time, but I think George
Some
brought
honorable
up some of
mentions
the
can
World
be.
Cup. Yes,
Yeah.
the
Some
World Cup
honorable
honorable
mentions. Like
mentions. Yeah.
I remember because I remember writing the report for it, which was especially painful, was the um yes, I did write the report for that. For the Abdul Razak absolute heist against South Africa in an
Yeah,
ODI in Abu
in
Dhabi, that
Dubai.
there were no
Yeah,
fans. There were maybe like 1,000 fans in the stadium in Abu
Yeah.
Dhabi, but and I hadn't moved there then. I was still in Pakistan. Absolutely crazy innings. Abdul Razak at his absolute, like, that was Abdul Razak in his batting, kind of like, this is his ceiling. That was it. Like, what he could do with the bat was that he
Yeah.
once hit McGrath for like 5 fours in an over in Australia in the 90s, I think, but this,
Yeah.
or in the 2000s. But this was like Abdul Razak. He had no business at all winning that game. And it was a nothing game. It was like, I think it was the first or second game of a 5 match series that nobody watched. It was actually Pakistan's first full series in the UAE after they had gone into exile after the 2009 attacks. So I guess, from that vantage point, it was like a feel good moment that, oh, look, they can still do this kind of crazy stuff even when they're playing abroad and stuff. So yeah, that one stands out for me for sure. Mohali wasn't actually a close game, but it was a big epic game. I think Mohali
Mm.
2011.
Yeah,
I,
the
I,
semi-final.
yeah.
Yeah.
Though you were with Cricinfo at the time, weren't you? For
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one, yeah.
So
I
there
remember.
was, Mohali
From
2011. That
yeah.
World Cup actually had a lot of pretty good games.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ireland versus England
Ireland
is
Yes.
versus
an
England
all-timer
Epic.
result. India versus
Absolutely.
England, which finished in a tie,
in
which
Bangalore.
Shane Warne had predicted before the
Yeah.
Had
game.
somehow predicted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was
So yeah,
was England South Africa a thriller as well from
in
that time? Like
Chennai,
a low
a
scoring,
low
low
scoring
scoring
thriller,
thriller,
which
yeah.
England actually won. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I
That
remember
World Cup did
thinking that
have.
was a really good World Cup actually after 2007, which I think only Sid Monga thinks that has ever been a good World Cup because he wrote a piece on it. Please check it out. But I think I remember that 2011 was actually a really good World Cup again to come back to. It was played
Yeah.
it was going to be India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, but Pakistan had to be pulled out of the venue. So India and Sri Lanka hosted the games, and it was just wonderful. There was good games.
Yeah.
And a great kind of narrative, to the whole thing. And with Yuvraj kind of dominating, that was a
Yeah.
lovely story in itself.
Yeah.
Yuvraj dominating that
So you had
tournament.
like even the 2015 World Cup had some good games.
Yeah, yeah,
With New Zealand having a great run in the tournament. India had a really strong run in the tournament. Australia, of course.
yeah.
Yeah, New Zealand and Australia played that
And
in Eden Park.
The final sucked so hard though,
Yeah, the
man.
final was very bad.
yeah,
Yeah.
It was like the 99. It reminded me of the
yeah,
99 final.
Right,
It was such
yeah.
a terrible final that, like,
yeah.
Yeah.
it kind of took the sheen off a little bit of that entire tournament.
Yeah.
And then when you come to the last World Cup of that decade, of course, with the final it had, that World Cup, I remember the way it started, there was a real sense of at the around the 20 game mark that this could become painfully slow. This could become painfully boring. And then over 2, 3 days, a bunch of these madcap results happened where I think Sri Lanka beat England,
Beat England, yes.
Malinga
Yeah,
inspired
yeah.
one. There was an epic South Africa New
Yeah.
Zealand, very old school ODI with a Williamson 100
Yes.
in a chase.
There was also an
Uh,
epic New Zealand
West Indies
West
with
Indies game.
Brathwaite.
West Indies
Yeah.
Correct.
with Brathwaite. Yeah.
The dream
yeah, yeah.
diminishes for Carlos Brathwaite were
Yeah.
the gradient
It was
wishes
a
towards
good
that.
World Cup. It was a solid
Yeah.
World Cup, actually. It was solid.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would just note the 2017 Champions Trophy final, not only because Pakistan won,
For
but
a
I think
result,
that's the only time that Pakistan and India have played in a 50 over ICC final, right?
Yeah,
I think
that's true. That's true.
the only time I think India and Pakistan. So
Yeah.
they played the group match which India won comfortably, and then they made it somehow Pakistan miraculous. It was a typical Pakistan run.
One of the most unwatchable games, the Pakistan-Sri Lanka game to decide who went through. It's a game no one wanted to win.
Nobody wanted to win. Like Sarfraz Ahmed, I remember getting them through after being dropped, a couple of real dollies.
Maybe 8 times.
And then the final was a great occasion. And, India-Pakistan in a 50-over final of a world event, rather than like a Sharjah or a Rothmans or Pepsi Singer Cup or something. I think for that, it stands out. I think.
And it's also notable as a tournament result that's actually the only time an ICC event has been won by the side that entered it as the bottom ranked team in the competition.
Yes.
That's what Pakistan
by the way,
managed.
They only got there because they organized a very late series against West Indies to up their ranking. So they totally gamed the system to get into that. But, I kind of appreciate that. It was a very Argentina-esque kind of move to game the system and get into the final and then even win it. Well done.
Amazing. All right. No arguments. The winner of the game of the 2010s is...
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's a good thing it wins because the match doesn't actually have a winner. The trophy was given to someone, but it is the best game of the decade. Coming to the 2020s, and this can be really quick because honestly, we went through, and I can only nominate 2 games here, and I think we will have some sort of consensus here. One, of course, George, Maxwell, Mumbai.
Yeah, Maxwell
miracle.
versus Afghanistan. That game was astonishing. As in, is this his innings basically? Australia were down and out, and then he was on one leg, and
not even at times.
Not even at times. Falling over on the pitch after hitting a 6, and incredible in that Mumbai heat and humidity. Fabulous effort. In the end, it wasn't even close, right? Like they won quite.
Yeah.
There
were 4 or 5 overs left, I think.
But they had only 1 wicket left, right? Was that
3? 3.
Oh, they had 3. Okay.
They were 90. They were 90 odd for 7. 200 required. That's when Cummins joins.
Yeah.
And
got it. It was Cummins. Yeah.
I think a contribution of 12 not out in the 200 run association.
It was excellent. Nothing contribution.
It was excellent.
Which then brings me to the issue we have with ODIs in this.
Before we go to that bigger subject, I do want to bring out what to me is the only other contender from this decade.
Which one?
Which is an absolute epic game from the World Cup qualifiers a few months before.
Yes.
This is June in Harare. And this is a game that result eventually meant West Indies did not qualify for a men's ODI World Cup for the first time. This was Netherlands-West Indies, 374 on the board. First, Netherlands chased it down with an astonishing finish. And I mean, they don't chase it down. They tie it down. And then they hit 30 in the super over.
Yeah.
And they win the game. And as a result, they make the final.
And West Indies don't.
Along with Sri Lanka and West Indies don't make it. That to me is a big contender.
I'm happy to go with either of those actually. Because like you said, like the 2020s has been like a pretty barren desert of a decade for the ODI.
Yeah. But George, you can now make the larger point of where we stand.
If you had to pick one, then I would probably pick the West Indies-Netherlands game because, overall it was a better game than just the one innings of Maxwell's against Afghanistan.
I will, in the slight defense, even I have my vote with the Netherlands-West Indies game, but in defense of that Afghanistan-Australia game, it also had in the first innings, I think Ibrahim Zadran batted through the innings.
Yes, he did.
With a century. You had Omar Zai picking up a lot of wickets.
Something like that. Yeah.
So I mean, there was a little more. Of course, it reaches its exalted status because of Maxwell
Yeah.
and what he pulled off. But yeah, if it has to come down to a vote for me, it is Netherlands West
Yeah,
Indies
I don't
for the
mind going with that
insanity of the game.
Netherlands game actually. I just as a slightly hutke pick, I don't mind going for that.
But the fact that we are what for this decade we had 6 years to choose from, and we struggled with
Yeah.
two. It is also let's point out that in a way, you when you spoke of the 70s, Osman, you spoke about how little ODI cricket was played, and that in those first 15 years it was an add-on to
Mm.
a test series or the end of a tour. It's almost like we've reached 5,000, but it's kind of come full circle where it is on the back burner. Right
Yeah.
now, we're
Yeah,
at a place where it is of interest because we are now into the last 15 months of an ODI World Cup
the World
cycle.
Cup. Yeah,
But
yeah.
there was a period between 2021 and 22 where almost no ODI cricket was played.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is, like in this day and age, when there's ODI cricket on at home, it's just on in the background, and then you go about your day doing these things. If you're at home, you're doing
Yeah.
whatever you need to do, and then you like just dip in and out of the ODI at the time, and that's probably because like we're older, we have duties and responsibilities and all of that. But like back in the 90s, or even in the early 2000s, when we had time, we would actually plan our day around an ODI we wanted to watch, you know, and have which is why I remember that random West Indies Sri Lanka game in Sharjah in the 90s because I made time to watch that game. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wonder now whether people who have the luxury of that time, people who are in their teens or in their early 20s, whether they plan their day around making space to watch an ODI because there's so many other things competing for attention.
Yeah, or they have other distractions.
To one thing, it's a lot. And then because of the condensed nature of T20 cricket, ODIs, you feel like you can tune out and then come back later on and catch the end
Yeah.
if it's worthwhile. But still, like every once in a while, you sit down to watch an ODI and you're reminded that what an ODI needs is just a good pitch that brings bowlers into the game.
Yeah.
And then the contest changes into something else. Yeah.
Also, I think
Oh.
like, and this is not the discussion for it, but I think it does need like some kind of like the Super League. I like the idea of the Super League. It got completely, destroyed by COVID, of course, the pandemic. But as an ODI Super League, a rolling kind of, like in football, they have the Nations League now for European countries, like a rolling league that means that matches are important for whether
Yeah.
it's for rankings, whether it's for qualification or whatever. If
Yeah.
they bring something like that back, ODIs will become interesting again because people will be invested in the result. Right now, nobody's invested in a result unless it's the World Cup or the Champions Trophy for an ODI or a World Cup qualifier. But if you bring something like that back, if you can fit it into a calendar, then I think ODIs again become
Yeah.
become relevant.
And also having a World Cup and a Champions Trophy every 2 years kind of dilutes the proposition of a
Absolutely.
bilateral ODI series.
Because
And
I think
it's
there's
a mixture
nothing
of,
that
yeah.
it naturally it finds itself now after the advent of T20s. It's a natural place to mix the best of both Test cricket format and T20 format. It's just natural. It's not either, but it's a bit of both. And there are people who like that. People who want somebody to come and hit 100 off or 50 off, say 25 balls, but they also want the first part of that match to be where somebody takes 3 for 12 off their first
Yeah.
5 overs or something. So you want that mix in there, I think, and I think you can achieve it in various ways.
They've also tinkered with the rules and playing conditions of ODIs beyond
So much.
it's so hard to keep track of what is what these days, Yeah. I'm hoping with the advent of a team being able to pick one ball after 34 changes the dynamics a little more
In the
in favor
dynamics
of the
of the
bowlers.
sport,
Let's see.
Yeah, we have already seen a bit of that happen. It feels like it might be some course correcting. Although, interestingly, when you mentioned the pitches, and if you have a sporting enough pitch, one that keeps the bowlers in it, I feel like, and I think George and I were discussing this in the office one of the days while the India England series was on, Usman, that a lot of times when that happens, you've reached a place where batters in white ball cricket also tend to suffer from what we often see in
Yeah.
tests. where you then find innings where you struggle to last 50 overs, where or what can at times make it an even more damaging game from a viewing perspective, where you lose 3 or 4 wickets and then it is 20 overs of just non-batting.
Of pain.
So those are the challenges, but I mean, and
which is why we're gonna miss guys like Kohli and Rohit and all these guys.
Why is anyone missing them? Why is anyone missing them?
Eventually,
the 2027 World Cup is 12, 13, 14 months.
I'm saying we will start missing these guys because they actually play across formats. Steve Smith.
And I was trying to ensure no wrong headlines are made out of your statement. So for the second time today, I have saved you from a potentially damaging statement. You are very welcome. And on that note, let me now completely damage all our futures by revealing to our audience that we also, as part of this exercise, did an internal vote of an all-time ODI 11. All-time 11 for men's ODIs, where Osman, George, Matt, who couldn't be here but did send his vote in, and myself, we picked our 11s. And we're just going to announce that, and then you guys can take over in the comments. We will not discuss it among ourselves because we are sure you will discuss it well enough. We will tag all the IDs so you can personally reach out to Osman, to George, to Matt. And I'll let you know that the combined 11, there were 5 unanimous votes.
What? Only 5? I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Only 3 you are about to find out part of the reason why Matt, even if he was available, might have actually been kicked out of this.
Josh Butler is in his 11, no?
No. So first thing, there is no Englishman in his list. So props there. But second thing, which nullifies everything, there's no Wasim Akram in his team.
In his team.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah, that calls for an immediate suspension. I think I've discussed this with.
Yes.
If not an outright sacking, I think we should suspend Bowler for a while.
Yeah, and you know what's funny, Osman? I didn't reveal this to you. It has Shahid Afridi, but it doesn't have Wasim Akram. It has Shahid Afridi at number 8 as his T20 entrant.
Maybe I change the suspension from a week to like a few days for that. Maybe I soften a little bit. I don't know.
Okay, but the grounds where we were unanimous were essentially 4 of our top 5: Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, Viv Richards, AB de Villiers, and one of our seamers in Glenn McGrath. There were a further 5 players who featured in 3 out of 4 teams, which was Adam Gilchrist at the top. The only exception was Matt's team, which had Sanat Jayasuriya. Lance Klusner, who I was so happy featured in all but George's teams. So Klusner gets our vote at number 7. Wasim Akram, who made all but Roller's team. Mitch Stark, who made all but George's team. And Saqlain Mushtaq, who made all but Matt's team. So that got us to 10, which already had 5 bowlers in it. And Sachin Tendulkar, very, very legitimate 6th bowling choice. So it came down to 2 different players who got 2 votes each. One was Muthiah Muralitharan, the other was MS Dhoni. Seeing the way our selected 10 stacked up, there was more of a role for Dhoni as a number 6, as a potential captain of this team. Then there was for Murli as another bowler, which would have then meant Klusner 6, Wasim 7 in our batting lineup. So
who are the spinners? Saqlain and Warner?
No, Saqlain, and we have Sachin other than that. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And Kohli. We can have Kohli's medium pace in there as well. Wrong foot medium pace in there as well.
Because we had Wasim, Stark, McGrath, and Klusner as the all-rounder, along with Saqlain. This is by the votes as it played out.
And then Sachin comes in with the 6th bowler option.
Yes. I can inform George had what would have been an insane bowling lineup because he had Saqlain and Murli and McGrath, along with Wasim Akram and Curtly Ambrose. George wanted to kill batters.
Do you have any batters in that lineup or not?
Yeah, my batting lineup is amazing. Tendulkar, Gilchrist, Kohli, Richards, ABD, Bevan.
Yeah, Bevan.
It was that good. Jump for 1996.
Bevan's another bowling option that you have.
Yeah, Bevan's another bowling option.
Left arm leg spin, that's another bowling option.
But I think I gave into nostalgia a little bit, and that Pakistan bowling attack from the 90s with Wasim, Saqlain, I was tempted to put even Waqar in there because
we've had that conversation.
I had a whole backup 11 also made, which had like Sanat and Waqar and all these guys.
And Ambrose. I had Ambrose in my 11 because I've never seen Ambrose bowl badly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't have bad days. He did
Yeah.
not have bad days.
Great. So we have sufficiently covered some bases by naming some extra names other than the 11, so that when they come at us, we can say that we considered them. But
We had
yeah,
a second 11.
let the floodgates open. I'm sure this will be a part of the conversation that will attract enough opinion. But let me also say that it has been great to actually get to celebrate this format, which, again, not revealing the age, but for the time I grew up, it was the format that we watched on a daily basis growing up, which had a lot to do in what role cricket had
I thought the
in the
format was
lives.
dying already in the 2010s, Yash. The
It has
decade
died
before.
multiple deaths, but it has stayed alive and it has reached 5,000. It has
Referring mostly to
crossed.
the decade that you were born in, which I'm not convinced was earlier than 2010s.
Yeah, so we're going to
We
have
will end it there.
5,000 ODIs next week, 150 years of,
Test
Test
cricket
cricket next year.
next year.
So yeah, let's see how much.
And 20 years, 20 seasons of the IPL, baby, next year.
Yes.
Oh,
There you
look who's
go.
the
It's a
rhyme.
triple whammy. It's a triple whammy.
Yeah, we've reached 5,000 ODIs. How many more there are, we'll find out. But for the moment, this was our special look back at everything that men's ODIs have given us as they hit the 5,000 mark. Osman, George, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.